All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Lauren Wadsworth, and I'm joined by my incredible RevOps business partner, Jaimie Ngan, and we're going to be talking to you today about evolving the RevOps backbone of your sales development program. So I'll just give a little brief intro, and then I'll have Jaimie do the same. I lead a team of 200 SDRs across inbound, outbound, and an inside sales team for Twilio. And they work across our different products, Segment and Flex. I've been doing this in the SDR space for over 7 years now, and I've seen a lot of changes in the industry and excited to talk through some of those with you all today. So Jaimie, I'll pass it over to you to do a brief intro.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually. My name is Jaimie Ngan. I've been working in the SaaS space for over a decade, spanning really across different industries from customer relations to the marketing analytics space, in addition to healthcare and finance. And so now I'm here at Twilio, hopefully making a great impact with Lauren and really driving the initiatives that we want within the organization, specifically on sales development and digital sales, which is what we're focusing on right now. But very excited to be here, very excited to be here with you all to learn and hopefully share some knowledges that we can incorporate today and spread.
Awesome. Thanks, Jaimie. So we have a few topics that we wanted to cover that we thought would be applicable for SDR leaders and sales leaders that are in the space. But we do want to get, pretty tactical and also share some examples that we've done. But we're going to go through this and ask each other questions and also just deep dive on some of these topics. So Jaimie, I'll kick it over to you to ask the first question here, and we'll go through.
Thanks, Lauren. One of the top questions that I think folks might be interested in is understanding really what's the benefit of having the interlock between people, process, technology. Why do you think it's important for the organization to have this so that it can be a high functioning SDR team?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. I mean, in any team, the people, process, and technology are going to be extremely important. For the SDR role, I think it's very unique in the fact that the process of how an SDR goes through their day and does their revenue generating activity to build pipeline for your organization, that process, if you make one tweak here that saves an SDR, 5 clicks of manual work, that could be an hour a week per SDR across your entire team. And that impact is millions of dollars in pipeline and later revenue for your business. And so and then I'll also say, when it comes to technology, if you look at, best in practice or best in class tools and technology across our industry, there's a really big difference. And I won't name names on here per se, but there's a really big difference between, what might look like a very similar tool or technology. And if you're not using, the best in class that has and supports all of the functionality and the reporting that you need to really dive in and do problem diagnosis, do analysis on how your team is performing, you're going to be left with a world of pain, not being able to, really diagnose where the issues are and where you need to action on. And so in the SDR world, I think these things become so much more important than they are maybe to some other teams that aren't, their entire day is not, calling 50 prospects a day and sending personalized emails and pulling in prospect data. So that interlock is extremely important. And it's also, why we really wanted to talk about this today, because I think there's been, a shift in mindset across the industry around how important these things are for the SDR role and the resources that are required to support them. Anything else that you want to add there that you think would be interesting for the folks listening?
It definitely 100%. I agree with you in terms of all of those pieces. And honestly, if one breaks, that does impact everything else with it. And I think that's the key piece that people tend to forget. If you don't have the right people in place, you don't have the right process built out, at least at the foundational level, in addition to the technology to make this team extremely efficient and effective, then it doesn't really provide that optimal output that you would want to present to your executive team. So I definitely think you hit the nail there, Lauren.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, let's go to the next topic. as we're going through. So evolving the backbone of your SDR program.
What would you say are the best practices that you can share with the group here about designing, building, even optimizing sales development as a whole?
I think one of the most overlooked things, and very timely as it's the topic of our talk today, is having a technical or operational resource, whether it's a shared resource or somebody dedicated to your team, to start as you grow. It's not something that, once you get to 50 SDRs, you're going to need. It's something that you're going to want from the beginning, especially if you know that you're coming into a team or you're part of an organization that is planning to scale, over time. Doesn't matter what time frame it is. If you're going to scale and you only have 5 heads to hire for an SDR role, I would trade one of those heads, even at that small of a size, for an operations resource, whether they report directly into you or they report into the operations team. Having somebody dedicated to the SDR function to do analysis on, basic things as you're even getting set up if you're in the early stages of building out a team. Things like, how many steps should we be building into our sequences? What are the daily KPIs that we're going to recommend to this team? And then iterate on and measure and see how that translates back to success. You need to be having somebody that can help you do analysis on your closed won customers. Where are we seeing, who are the contacts in those deals that are closing, to feed back into the buyer personas that you're targeting. All of these, really important pieces that really inform your go-to-market strategy as a business. If you don't have somebody in the trenches with you looking through all of this stuff, it's going to be very hard to, be successful. You can do a lot of it yourself, but you also need to be managing a team of people who are earlier in career. And this may be their first or second job. And you also have to teach people, how to be an employee and work for the first time. And so that piece to really have, to grow and to evolve your SDR team over time is crucial. And then the other piece I'd say is, if you have a team that is larger, and you're not just getting set up, like we'll talk about in a little bit, things that you can bring your RevOps partner in and what responsibilities you can cascade and have them take on. But those type of things just help set up for success for the long term. They help set up for scale and build the foundation of what your team should look like and will look like over time.
Great. No, definitely agree there.
So next, we wanted to talk a little bit about the rise of SDR strategy, analytics, and operations roles in the industry, having people that are dedicated to sales development or even, inside sales teams in some aspects. We've seen there's more dedicated teams and people who are specific to this role. I would love to hear from you, Jaimie, like, how have you seen that change over time? What is your vision around how these roles partner with SDR teams? And just tell us a little bit about what you've seen in your time in RevOps and how it's changed.
Absolutely. I will say that when I started in this career, people had tend to see this role more as a operational and kind of, hey, anything I don't want to do on the sales side, let's hand it over to this group here. And I would say that, to really become that trusted advisor, which you might hear commonly with specific to this business partner position, is really providing that value, right? And that could be in different capacities, which I'll talk about in a second. But really the evolution of, let's say, RevOps, sales strategy, sales ops, however you want to term it within your organization, has been instrumental in the sense of you're really that right-hand person to your leader, and then really being able to lend them this view and perspective that they typically may not see or have an oversight on, only because they're busy with 20,000 different things that are going through within their organization, from like managing the team to, making sure they're hitting their number, to making sure that the leadership team is aware of all of the great things that they're working on. And so what I would say in terms of the differences in growth of this role specifically, and knowing that my background also has been more on the sales side of things, they really lean on you when you become that valuable business partner. They really kind of, are the person they go to ask questions, or if they're trying to make a decision, whether it's a strategic plan that they have or even a brainstorm they want to do, because they know that you have A, visibility into the business, B, know the numbers, and then C, like have this way of processing things holistically so that you can start to build more of a overall framework that they can then take to their executive team and be able to pitch for an idea. So to be a little bit more specific in terms of 3 areas that I think this team and this person or role can play a huge part is really, again, being that COO or CSO, so strategy officer to your business, and really being able to provide you the right insights and analytics at the right time. So not so much of just the person who builds the dashboards or reports, but actually surface that information and give you, like, again, insights crossing that data and other parts of the business. For example, building the relationships with the sales side, even at their level of leadership, in addition to their business partners, and then tying things together so that you can all problem solve and make sure like we're addressing things and aligning across the board, so the buy-in makes it super seamless. I think the other part that's also important, and this is really where I think it becomes like, this is where you can go to this person, is when you come into a conversation and you always have a perspective or even a recommendation. It doesn't have to be, extraordinary. It doesn't have to be backed up by like thousands of data points. It's more of making sure you listen, and you provide your input, so that if you think it can drive the conversation forward, like go for it, like don't hesitate, like try it and see how that goes, right? Because again, you have a different viewpoint than what your leader would be, thinking of at the time, because again, they have a lot going through their minds. But then the last part I think that's also key and important is like kind of what you said already, Lauren, which is the process and making sure all of those like pieces and foundational pieces are built out so that you can really start to drive innovation within your organization and scale at the same time. So being able to get creative, be strategic, make sure you have like the foundational pieces set in stone so that you can change where you think you need to, but then more importantly, like align across all of the stakeholders and then really move your organization forward. But those are some of the key pieces I think that are pretty important. I don't know, Lauren, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, those are great. And I think that's one of the things that, I learned really how to up-level the way I work with my business partners from working with you for the past year and then some. And one of the things that you mentioned about bridging the gap and building really strong connections between other departments, that's something that your strategy and ops person is there to do and to help do, and making sure that they're intertwined with the ops people working across other departments, and they know what's going on, and they're bringing back that information for you. And just like you said, when it comes to providing insights, one of my favorite things and like my aha moments when I first started working with you was, this is somebody that shares, this is not somebody to just help you in your business. They are your co-CEO of the business, like you said, and you're driving that forward. Your ops strategy and ops person should have, in their mind, like your target is their target. They do not feel successful if your team and the team that they're supporting is not hitting their numbers, and coming with insights or even ideas on, hey, have we tried this? Let's experiment and get innovative, especially in this market. I don't have to tell anybody that we're in right now, where it's, infinitely harder to get responses from prospects and get them to show up for meetings that you book. Being able to have a partner who knows your business really deeply and can give you advice and be a strategic thinker is invaluable. Real quick, before we move to the next topic, I wanted to also, chat through, when you are, one of the things that I think people really struggle with is, what do I work with my strategy and ops person on? And so we wanted to talk a little bit about what exactly, like how you should be working with your GTM business partner. But before we go into that, I actually wanted to ask Jaimie, for people who are listening to this and they don't have somebody that's dedicated to the SDR, strategy, analytics, operations, function, whatever people want to call it. You don't have somebody dedicated. Maybe it's a shared resource. Maybe you've been asking for it, but don't necessarily know how to do that. Can you talk a little bit about like what are some things that SDR leaders could go to their bosses, whether it's, you know, the CMO or the chief revenue officer, whoever they, you know, roll into, to make the case for something like this? You know, especially when it comes to differentiating between if their boss is just to say, well, why don't you just use the people on the RevOps team that support sales? Like, why do we need somebody dedicated? Can you share a little insight into why those are different, the importance of having somebody dedicated, and you know, something that people can take away?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll start with kind of outline, if you are the leader of your organization, all the things you're doing today, like to the details of everything, right? So whether it's like managing your team, working with the administrators of the different tools to optimize something, or even like designing the numbers or targets or quotas, any of those pieces, whether again, business process improvement, numbers, pulling numbers yourself, reporting, any of it, like write it all down and start to categorize it. And then with that, present to your manager on what areas you think you should focus on, which we all know what your role would be, right? Is to accelerate the business, bring more pipeline in for the company. And what are the areas that you think this person would be great for? And that would be that bucket. Again, it's not a catch-all for everything that you don't want to do. It's more of like, well, I need this still, but I can't do this because I only have X amount of hours per day that I can do, on top of making sure that you, my manager, are informed and the exec team is informed with all of the things that are happening with my org. So that, I think, is a really great way to put together a proposal. So again, like really outlining it and explaining like how your day is split up and how you think you're best prioritizing your time so that it can bring more for the company. And then knowing that if you had this other person alongside you, they can help you, run all of that, and then you don't have to worry about it. And then together you'll make like a core team. As you know, best results never come from just one person, right? So I would say that's like baseline. A few things that you can think about for this role specifically, and like how you can lean on them, would be basic things, in my opinion, like forecasting, quota setting, understanding targets and how they're set at the company level, process improvements, their tool stack, and how do we best use these tools so that, again, your team is operating efficiently and effectively. And what I would say is one of the core differences between having a shared versus a dedicated resource under your group is simply prioritization. If you have to lean on another organization or department to help you provide like insights or analytics, they're not going to be as knee deep as you are and this other person if you had them under your team to be able to voice the different challenges that you're seeing. Because ideally, your strat partner would be with you in most of your business conversations, so they hear that, right? And a central person doesn't have the time to do that, and B, it's not really within their scope of work. So I would say that's definitely one area that you can, add to that proposal. The second piece is really they're going to have different priorities by their managers. So you could be one of 20 things that they have to accomplish in that week. And, depending on what the execs say, that could then create a fire drill, which then means everything gets pushed down even further. So again, I would say, like, if you need timely information or if you need something really at the fingertips of your hands, then definitely having that dedicated resource helps tremendously.
Yeah.
And then third, what do you think, Lauren? Like, what do you think would be a top three?
I'd just say one other thing to really know and educate your executives on is the difference between a sales role and an SDR role. And I think that sometimes can help people envision, oh, this is why it's very different. And it can't just be somebody that's half focused on sales, half on SDR. Like Jaimie said, things will get deprioritized, when there's territory changes coming up. Yes, it's great to carve territories for the AEs. Well, guess what? We still need to assign all of the pairings and make sure that they're, even across the SDR team as well. And so what I'd say there is, like, one of the things that I think has been eye-opening for my former bosses when I've had this conversation is take a look at the life cycle even of an SDR. This is somebody, if you hire an AE, obviously it's different across organizations, but it's somebody who is going to come in and ramp up over, 6 to 9 to 12 months. And usually they have sales experience coming in some way, shape, or form. And They have worked and they've used Slack before. They have used Salesforce. They've seen that reporting. Well, hey, when we're hiring SDRs, I'd say probably half of the ones that we bring on, this is their first job. We have a lot of second, it's their second job or their career changers, industry changers. But for those that it is, when they're early in career, like they're seeing a Salesforce report for the first time. So you're not only teaching them how to be a great outbound or inbound SDR, you're also teaching them how to be an employee and how to use all of these different tools that they're accustomed to. And, you have to ramp them in 3 months and get them fully productive. And then you also have to plan for backfilling, by the time that they're reaching 12 months. And even just the headcount and capacity planning is so different from, any other role. That it really warrants somebody that is going to be 100% dedicated and focused. And I would trade ahead if, I had a head count to hire for SDRs, I would trade ahead at any size of the team that I'm at any time that I possibly could do that and make that change to get somebody, whether they report into me or they report into the RevOps team, who's 100% dedicated to supporting the SDR org.
Thank you. I definitely agree. One more thing to add there too is that the SDR org is a lot more complex than I think people realize, whether it comes from the tools they use, which is a lot more than sales, to be honest, and even the numbers that we look into to dive in and see like where really are the gaps. Is it the response rate? Is it the lack of replies we're getting from customers? It's very, I would say, like analytical in that sense, and also tactical, so that if it doesn't follow a certain formula, like we need to know what that is and then be able to pivot, versus like running a sales cycle, which at some point in time you start to get like into the groove of like knowing how to sell the product, but to the degree of like how the sales org, like sales development org operates, I would say they're very, very different.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jaimie. All right, thank you so much. So next we're going to talk through, give some tips on how to best work with your business partner. We've already touched on it a little bit, but first we also wanted to talk through like what are the things to actually work on with your go-to-market strategy and ops business partner. Some of the things that I work on with Jaimie, that when I first had a dedicated business partner for the SDR team that I ran, I had no clue how to work with them. I'm like, what do I go to them for? What do I involve them in? And if you don't have somebody who is, like a Jaimie, who's coming in and is going to tell you, here's where you plug me in and just take charge like that, and you need to give some of that direction, it could be helpful for people to know, what do you work on with people? For me, like it really started with headcount and capacity planning and getting that stood up, working really closely, Jaimie and I both, but she would really help own this, work really closely with finance, for example, on how many heads can we hire preemptively, and let's build a process for backfilling ahead of time when we know that there's performance or risks or upcoming promotions that are on the team. So that was one that we started on. Jaimie, there's, I could probably list 20 different things. Do you want to share some of the things that you think SDR leaders should really prioritize having their RevOps and strategy partner own?
Yeah, definitely. A few other things I can add to that list would be, making sure you have your dashboards and the views ready to go at your level and even at your directs level, so that you're all looking at the same thing and then you're all reporting the right numbers, right? I think just standardization is key, and I think tends to be overlooked, because one tiny little filter in that report could change up the way that you tell a story versus what your manager is telling you specifically, or your directs. And then that really ties into the other processes that are pretty important, I would say, for sure, is like forecasting, because you as a leader need to forecast to your exec teams on how you're performing, and then showing that against your actuals, again, justifying the gaps within your organization to seeing like where you need to improve. So being able to have a very strong cadence on how you run the business operationally and also through forecasting and those means is key. And that ties closely into like quota setting and making sure, hey, like, are the targets you have right now, are they achievable once those get rolled out as quotas to the street? So to your organization, and then making sure like there is that buffer for you as a leader to have that gap. So in the event that you do have maybe a couple of underperformers not really pulling their weight, you have knowing that you have that kind of that overassign essentially. So having someone to help you look into that is going to be important. So again, going back to Lauren's point about capacity, planning ahead, making sure we're not going to have that drop significantly, because if you think about it, the target set for the year or could be quarterly, regardless, that number won't change. They're not going to make an exception for you, but at least you have control of what gets rolled out to your team specifically. But I would say those are some of the key ones when it comes to looking at the numbers. Again, other ones that are important is really getting a full like foundational understanding of like the organization, the tools, like if it's working with marketing ops, your finance stakeholders, your compensation team specifically, even just a very varied amount of individuals that this person would want to be that connected to, so that again, your organization gets all the details they need from these respective teams.
Yeah, those are great tips. I'm trying to think of like some really good examples of things that you and your team have plugged in and helped with. There's an infinite number of them. One of them that has been paramount for getting strategic, doing problem diagnosis, and also communicating upward for me to executives is having a global, it's just in a spreadsheet, it's a global KPI metrics pack that is updated every Thursday, automatically, I think through Salesforce that Jaimie and her team built. And it has all of the metrics that we would talk through, or that execs or that you as a leader would want to see, meetings booked, MQLs, conversion rates, pipeline, productivity of the team, how that's changed week over week, quarter over quarter, year over year. And so that snapshot that we grab every week and that I look at along with other reporting, of course, really helps us identify where should we dig in and dive into certain aspects. When we saw meeting to QO conversion rate was dipping, we launched a full blown analysis for one of our teams on what regions, what bands is this happening in, what are the reasons for it. And it led to us creating new fields on opportunities to understand why things weren't progressing, so that we could get more data. And that's been really useful in, trying to identify trends across the team and create action plans or enablement to improve. So that's just one example of something that you could work on with your strat and ops person. I know we are, running short on time, so we'll wrap it up and just talk through, when somebody is a dotted line to you, and you're working with them, we kind of talked through some of the best practices. Do you have any other like things that, Jaimie, for you being in RevOps, and being a strategic business partner, are there any things that you would tell SDR leaders that how they should be working with their business partners, and ways that they can make sure that they're working with them the right way and really effectively to set up the team and their partnership up for success?
Yes, I would say whenever you start a role, regardless of whichever role you start, you should always want to know who you're going to be working closely with, and then getting those recommendations from, again, your key business stakeholders. So for example, you as a leader, someone starts on board, you want to let them know like, hey, these are the people that I typically work with, but these are the people I think I also want you to work with. And so when you start that position, or even if you're in seat today, it's always important to build those relationships and that rapport, because when you do need something, like once they know who you are and they understand your world and why it's important for them to help you and being able to speak their language, it becomes so much easier than having to send an email or Slack message or any whatever platform you use and say, hey, like, I need you to do something. Can you add that field? They're going to like ask you, well, why? And you don't give context. But if you have that rapport and they know the value that your organization brings to the overall company, and you tie it back together and you share even the business context of it, I think is key. The one thing I find to be very helpful when I ever implement anything with a technical partner within my organization, for example, is say like, hey, like, huge thank you for helping me the other day, because what you did helped drive more pipeline for the organization. And when they hear how much value their work had contributed to that overall process, like it just, their eyes like they widen and they're thrilled, right? Because they don't hear that a lot. And I think when you can do that for them, it makes their jobs easier. It makes them feel more empowered to do work with you, and in general, just contribution to their team.
That is so true. And they understand the value of the work that they're doing and how it impacts, the broader organization. That's such a good reminder for everybody. Thank you, Jaimie. Well, thank you all so much for listening and joining us today. We'd love to go in and dive deeper on some of these topics, maybe at a later date. If people are interested or have questions, reach out, add us on LinkedIn, let us know. We're really passionate about sales development and building a great workflow for your reps, and partnering effectively with the people across your team and your support system. So thank you, everybody, so much. And thank you, Tenbound, for the opportunity. And hope everyone has a great rest of their week.
Thanks all. Have a good one.
Everybody. Okay.